backups just in case something goes out. Oh, and just by the way, I'll cut this out since I already hit recording. For the past 2 weeks, for whatever reason, my internet will sometimes hang and I'll freeze or you'll freeze. But it lasts like 5 to 10 seconds and then we come back. So I'm still here. Just if it happens, just give it a second. So I don't, but anyway, all right. Well, thanks for being here. Welcome to the podcast. How's it going tonight?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about all the things.
Yeah, I love talking about health, fitness, some nutrition, which that's kind of a dogma, kind of a conversation depending on who you're talking with. But it's just fun for me to talk about just because I have the whole background of it. You know, I coach CrossFit. I compete in it. I love it. But we're not here to talk about me. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. So before we get going too far, why don't you give everyone a nice little gist of your background before we start going too crazy?
Absolutely. So, hi, everybody. My name is Allie. I'm a functional health and fitness coach, and I've been in the industry for almost 8 years now. I think it's been, I don't know where time goes, but it's been a great ride so far. Growing up, was an athlete. So physical fitness, competition, sport, all of that was very much a part of who I was, a big value for me in life. But like most people, I knew nothing about nutrition. I knew nothing about taking care of myself, more from a holistic standpoint. And that was really evident to me when I went to college. I played basketball for a couple of months at a D3 school, decided it was no longer for me. So I decided to quit and pursue other things. Part of the other things that I decided to pursue was drinking a lot of margaritas, eating terrible food, and just living a terrible lifestyle like most college kids do. And I quickly found myself not feeling my best, being somewhat overweight, just feeling super lethargic, very tired, very reliant on energy drinks or coffee. And fast forward a couple months after I graduated college, my mom was diagnosed with stage 3 brain cancer. So I moved across the country. It was very sudden. I became one of her caregivers along with my father. And it was one of the most challenging periods of my life, basically being her caregiver until the end of her life, about 9 months to a year later. And in that process, though, I really learned the importance of taking care of yourself, and not only for yourself, but so that you can show up as your best self for everyone else around you. So I think a lot of people think it's selfish to, put their health first, to prioritize their fitness, to make those things part of their daily routine. But in reality, it actually benefits everyone else that you come in contact with every single day. So ever since then, I kind of fell into what I call the biggest rabbit hole of my whole life. And I'm just like really deep in the rabbit hole still. And I don't anticipate that I will ever get out. So here I am, 8 years later, helping other women to basically transform their lives through health and fitness, and to really help them get to that next level of who they want to be.
Damn, that was a lot.
Yeah, sorry, you didn't ask for the short version.
No, that's fun. I just had I had a couple talking points in my head while you were talking, but hopefully I'll remember them as we talk. But anyway, I guess my first one was with your mom. Was there any signs of the stuff coming up, or was it just, hey, it just happened all of a sudden, you had to deal with it?
Yeah, and that's a great question. It was pretty sudden. So I think she started exhibiting symptoms about 3 months prior to her formal diagnosis. So she was otherwise a very, healthy, at least seemingly on the outside person, which is what made, I think, the diagnosis that much harder to kind of swallow. But she did start to have seizures just very randomly. I think she had maybe 3 or 4 of them prior to her diagnosis, but it wasn't a consistent thing. She would have one. We'd go to the hospital. They would tell her that, she just had swelling of the brain tissue, and that's what was causing it. And, nothing ever really came about from that until 3 or 4 months later. And it kind of happened 2 or 3 more times. And things, each time it happened, seemed to progress a little bit more. And then, obviously we went into more of a diagnosis mode.
Yeah, that's one of the things. And I guess these last few years, and I don't know if it's because of COVID or what, but along with the whole health and fitness and thing, I've been more interested in the brain and how it works, and, things that we can be doing, to keep, I guess, mental health. Is that the right word? I mean, or just brain cognitivity, I guess. And just that and stuff like that, just kind of, and I'm like you, when I see people who are having, or like going through something like that, it's like, man, what can I do to kind of prepare myself and try to prevent everything from something like that happening. But it's almost, a lot of information for people to take in, especially for me, especially for when you're fully going into just learning about the brain and all the inner functions, and then going down rabbit holes of like, oh, you should be taking, lion's mane. You should be doing challenges every day that keeps the brain going or whatever. Does that kind of make sense? And
Yeah.
it always like that started to play more of a issue in my life, is like learning more about that rather than just actual go work out, eat whatever you're eating. It's just for fuel for your body and live that part of the healthy life. Because I think some people forget about that part of it, the inside workings of the body, rather than just, the vanity approach.
100%. Yeah. No, that's really all about that's the approach I take now. So when I started getting into this field, I had a trainer and a coach who convinced me to go into bodybuilding, and it was great at the time, but I very much started in that kind of place of vanity, body transformation, all of that, which was all fine and great. And that's still part of what I do, because that's what a lot of women want. But my goal when I have someone come in as a client is to, educate them on really what's going on underneath the hood, and educate them on the fact that, it really doesn't matter if you have a six pack or you look a certain way, if you're not feeling and functioning your best, and we're not also setting you up to have optimal health from a longevity perspective, then what's the point? Who cares if you look great, if you don't feel great, and if you don't have that foundation to, potentially have at least better quality of life for the long term, and even extending the life. But especially when you talk about the brain and how nutrition, how exercise, how sleep, that was one of the things when my mom got sick. I started doing a ton of self-research, really asking why. That was the question I wanted to know, right? Why does someone who never gets sick get a diagnosis like this? And of course the doctors, they can't tell you. They're like, we don't know. And you're like, great, that makes, three of us. So, I started really looking even as deep as environmental toxins and all the things that we either expose ourselves to by choice or that we're exposed to in our environment, how emotions, beliefs, past traumas, how that affects us at a physiological level, and how, all of that really interplays to basically affect your health one way or the other.
Yeah. I became, it seems like it's become more popular in talking about, I guess, the brain and just cognitive abilities, and because there's so many signs of now that's coming out from NFL and even soccer with CTE protocols. And I know that's kind of different from what we were just talking about, but it just seems to be more health awareness with the brain, and just that it's a lot more information coming out. Kind of what I said earlier about like microdose, take lion's mane, use some sort of, I don't know, ayahuasca, like psychedelic things, just in order to, and this is not about that, but this is in order to relive or make amends with these traumas that you might have, and that might be affecting your brain and what you're living with, and what you don't really know what you're not living with. Just because I've heard a couple different people talk about, taking ayahuasca, and then like, oh, once I met my demons or whatever it is. I've never done it. And for the record, just going off hearsay. So what I've heard on other podcasts, what people talk about it, but just talking about, they relived that trauma and they made amends with it. Now they feel so much better and can live their life in a more stress-free, carefree way, I guess. And this, and I guess what I'm getting at is just, that stuff like that never occurred to me, is that how much, micro trauma or major trauma that people are actually living with, and actually what it's impairing on a person within himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. It's fascinating. I love the research, particularly in that area of psychedelic research that's, coming out of legitimate, universities and other institutions for microdosing. I think is fascinating. So I think there's definitely some stuff that's going to be coming out in the next couple of years.
Yeah. And with the legalization of it all, Johns Hopkins University is doing one study with it, and just using psychedelics to help people with brain injuries and even like PTSD, I think. Mm-hmm. But, a lot of people seem to be microdosing now, and I don't know a lot about it, but I don't know. I've heard some people that I do know that have done it have talked about it's put them in a different mood compared to other people. Say that they have more of a stress-free daily life, just, using small amounts of putting in their tea and drinking it or however they did it. And I guess just like, with nutrition and hormones and everything else, what you're feeding yourself, whatever diet you're on, it's not always going to react the way it does for person X versus person Y. Yes, that kind of makes sense. But anyway, but I wanted to ask you, before I forget about it, that you said you got into bodybuilding. Was that after college? So the difference, like you were actually a bodybuilder compared to, was it the figure competitions, or is that one and the same?
So yeah, actually, that's a great question. So I did get into it after college. So after college, took care of my mom after she passed. I'd say probably 3 months after that, I found myself in a very kind of dark, depressed place, still not feeling good about myself physically and mentally. I also, coming out of college and going straight into that caregiver mode, I grew up as an athlete. I grew up as a pretty high achieving student. And so I always had that like next metric of what I was working toward. And after college, and then after losing my mom, I just kind of felt like I was flailing through life. Like I didn't have a goal that I was actively working toward. I didn't really know what I was super passionate about. I was trying to work through all my grief and all of that. And so I went back to what I knew, and that was, sport, athletics, physical fitness, things like that. And so I hired a coach to help me basically just feel better, give myself a goal. And she kind of talked me into going into fitness competitions. So I competed with the WBFF. That's a little bit different than NPC or IFBB, which are your more typical bodybuilding organizations. So I did bikini and fitness were my two categories. So a little less intense, for lack of a better word, than like a figure competitor or a true bodybuilding competitor.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, still intense to some degree, but it was fun. But I definitely witnessed both in myself and in the industry, like going from one extreme to the other, where I was like so obsessed with what I ate. Like my life revolved around my food, around my training, and served me at that time. But I quickly started to see where my own patterns were becoming disordered, whether it was with food, with body image. Like I remember the first time I went to Canada to visit two friends, and I was like not going to be able to work out for 6 days. And I was like, oh my God, like what's going to happen to me? And plot twist, nothing happened. I had a great time.
So going back a little bit though, I mean, you said you played collegiate basketball and then you got into this. Did that kind of meet the same needs as you got from playing collegiate basketball, I guess? You got the same competitive kind of thing, and you wanted to have, I guess, the same type of performance mode, that athletic mindset, that competitive mindset. Is that kind of, did it meet the need, I guess, or meet the
Yes.
of what you want?
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
Okay.
At that time, it definitely met the need. So for me, like I wanted something that I could laser focus in on and just, show up to the gym, get in my zone, get in that rhythm. For me, it was like meditation. It was almost like going to therapy, going to the gym, I'm sure you know about that. And so in that sense, having that discipline and that structure to kind of guide me and to create that mental toughness was definitely kind of one and the same. Now, I will say it was definitely different going into a sport where you're judged on aesthetic versus performance. So, I played basketball, I did volleyball, I ran track in high school. And so, everything was performance based. So that was a little different. And, that's something that still to this day I kind of miss, is that performance aspect. And then, of course, the team aspect of, team sports. I love team sports. I love working with others. I think that we're stronger together. And so, there were definitely elements of those things that were missing. But as far as the cultivating that mental discipline and just, creating that structure to show up for myself every single day, it definitely fulfilled that need.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Just because, I played sports in high school and then in college did a few intramurals. And when I found CrossFit, it met that wholeness kind of thing for me, where it was the competitive side, but you had your social kind of hour too while you were working out. You were meeting new people, and you were also putting yourself through a grind of a workout, and just finding out how physically and mentally tough you were along people who are work for the fire department, police department, or just other people who are just trying to get in some type of shape, and just feed that competitive hunger they might have within.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I've been doing it for the past 10 years, but just everything you said, like I've met some of the best people, I have through my life, and I've competed with a bunch of people as a team competitions. And it's just my thing. Like it makes sense to me to keep doing this. And even, I'm a young 36 right now, but it's just, there's people out there saying like, oh, you're 36. Why you keep doing this stuff? And why do you go 6 days a week? And it's like, well, I mean, not only just from the physical standpoint, but as we've kind of been talking about this whole time, is just the mental thing of it though, is just that, man, if I didn't do it, I don't know what I would do. I mean, like I think about that a lot, that, when I leave my 9-to-5 job, going home, it's like, what am I just going to go home and sit there and watch Netflix and eat Doritos? I guess I could take up golf again or something, but, but I mean, it's just like, this is my thing, just because it's like an all in one compass of, like, just like I said, the physical, social, getting your stress out, having bro conversations with the boys and just throwing back a little bit. And so, yeah, and I get what you mean. Just, moving into something like that, it's like, thank you. This is like, where would it, and I'll kind of wonder, like, where would I have been if I wouldn't have found it? I think I still probably would have been working out on campus, I guess. I still worked out, don't get me wrong, but it was just not on campus, but in a traditional gym. But I don't know if it would have been the same, I guess is where I'm getting at.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, there's definitely, I love going to the gym and just knocking out a workout, but there's definitely something about having that supportive environment to like push each other, to cheer each other on. And I've admittedly never truly done CrossFit myself. I've done some similar iterations. I'm open to it though. So maybe I will try it in 2023, but I do like, that is something when I see the CrossFit community, I think is awesome, because like, even though you're competing for your performance, like you do still have that team environment, and there is that support and that camaraderie. And I think that, we're social creatures. So I think that when you can bring that element of fitness in with the community aspect, it just makes it that much more powerful.
Yeah, it's one of the things that, I advocate obviously for CrossFit a lot on here. And just like I said, just with everything, that it's been my thing, but ultimately I don't really care. Quite, CrossFit's always got a bunch of, I guess, shade thrown at it, I guess is a good way to put it. But ultimately, like, and people think that I think if you don't do CrossFit, then I won't like you or whatever. And it's like, and that's not what I try to say. I just like, CrossFit has worked for me, and it's, made me the person I am today, as far as mentally, and the best shape of my life, I guess you could say. And that, and I guess my point is that, if as long as people are moving and doing something that's making them happy and being healthy and not complaining, that I don't care what it is, whether it's, Zumba, yoga, just running. Hell, I love all that stuff. I've done all that stuff when I was teaching on campus and stuff. And it's fun. But so, yeah, I guess that's just my point. It doesn't have to be CrossFit. It's just like, do something, like if you're not healthy, find something that will make you healthy in a way that you want to be, I guess. And all about that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. What I just got from that is find something that's going to make you out of breath enough that you can't complain.
Exactly. Right. And that's one of the things that it gets on my nerves so much. And it's almost a pet peeve, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, that, when people start talking about, not being able to do X and Y and Z, and just that, I'm not going to go park at the end of the parking lot because I'll be out of breath by the time I get there. And it's like, maybe that should be the first red flag, bro. Like,
why you should do it.
But yeah, if you're walking from one end of the parking lot, and then, not hating on anybody who can or can't do this, but it's just like, well, if you're complaining about being unhealthy, and then that's something like that happens, it's like, well, maybe you should just go outside and walk around your neighborhood, maybe 2 or 3 days a week, start there and see what happens.
Totally.
So, but when you started getting pretty serious in the whole nutrition game, right? Like, was that with during your bodybuilding days? Is that because obviously you were probably, I guess, trying to think of like or analyzing every little thing you ate, correct?
Yeah.
And what doesn't work, and
right. Yeah, no, definitely. I was very fortunate to have a great coach who was able to guide me in that area, and provided, all of the structure I needed from the bodybuilding aspect. But nutrition was actually one of the first areas that was really like where I wanted to learn, whether that was like self-study. It was my first certification. So I was a certified nutrition coach before I ever went into, getting a personal training certification. And then basically all of my certifications since then have been some iteration of like integrative nutrition or functional nutrition. And so, yeah, for me, the nutrition aspect, it really started because when my mom was sick, I remembered, she had one primary care doctor, which, when you have cancer, like your primary care doctor is not doing a lot. They're like adjusting your blood pressure medication. And then, you're going to your oncologist and all your other specialists for things, but no one ever talked to us about diet. And it wasn't something I thought about until we were in her primary care doctor's office one day. And he mentioned like, by the way, you should, probably eat like primarily plant-based. Or he said like, you should eat more plant-based foods. It was something, it was very vague. And at the time, like, I was like, okay, great. Like plants, vegetables, cool. Like what, so we just eat more broccoli. Like, what do you mean? And like, that was it. That's all he said. And that was about, cancer and why someone gets cancer and what potentially plays into that from a pathology standpoint, and what exacerbates that issue. And I started, learning about food and the role of nutrition in disease in general, and how it can be so powerful to prevent or to contribute. And when I learned that literally like cancer cells feed off of sugar, I got really, really, really pissed off, because when my mom was sick, she, in her mind, she was like, I only have, X amount of months to live. I'm going to enjoy it. So she would be like, hey, let's go to Dairy Queen. And I'd be like, okay, my mom wants Dairy Queen. I'm going to take her to Dairy Queen. Meanwhile, like, do I think that, we could have saved her life had we not gone to Dairy Queen? Maybe not. But like, the reality is that we were giving her, and she, was asking for things that were directly, creating or exacerbating the issue that was already at play. Meanwhile, you pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for medical care for a condition like that, and not one person talks to you about the importance of food. And so I just was like floored afterward when I learned this, at just the medical system in this country, which, I try not to dog on it all the time, because it's wonderful for certain things. It has its time and place. Absolutely. But the fact that that's such a critical component in giving the body the ability to kind of help heal itself and help the process, and that no one was talking about that. So for me, nutrition was like this big light bulb that was like, oh, there's clearly a huge gap here with what people know. And then as I started learning, I realized, and this still kind of happens, what I thought was true, or what I thought was, the answer when it came to nutrition isn't always the case. And so, I realized how much misinformation is out there, how much lack of education is out there, and how much, are the people that we look up to in the medical community, how much that's not a part of even their training. So of course they don't talk about it, because, a lot of them don't actually know that much about it either. And that's scary to me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I read a statistic or heard it somewhere where medical doctors only have to do like 8 hours of nutrition or something.
yeah, it's wild. So my sister is a doctor, and she is amazing. She's a podiatrist, amazing at what she does. I think had to take one nutrition class, which granted she's working on feet, but still, when you look at how much time and how many hours are spent learning about, anatomy, physiology, biology, biochemistry, all of those things, like you would think that we would learn a little bit more about that. And so like oftentimes she comes to me for any question related to nutrition. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes it doesn't make any sense to only do 8 hours, just because of so much information and studies that are coming out now about how much what you're putting in your body plays into, like we said kind of early in the podcast, just what's going on inside the body. But, and then plus, people like you, I mean, I'm glad you're out there and you're studying it and learning everything, because it's always changing, and that it's hard for me. Like took me a while, but I figured out what works for me, as far as like, I mean, I look at food as fuel, really. I've never been a foodie. I've never been one of those guys that had, just give me some meat and some fruit. I'm usually pretty happy. Right. I mean, I don't know. I've been trying meat and fruit lately, and this is maybe a side tangent here, just because I've been listening to Paul Saladino and these carnivore guys that talk about all the meat, and then how vegetables are kind of, they don't want to be eaten now. But anyway, that just works for me. I'm not advocating for that diet. If some people want to do it, that's fine. But yeah, and I guess it's just my thing is that, just with all the information being thrown about nutrition and what to do, it's just mind blowing to me. And I'm glad, like I said, I'm just glad that you're out there and you're keeping up with it, and you're able to relay the information where if I have questions, I can still come and ask you about it or whatever.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I'll be completely honest. There's, a lot of great people, a handful that come to mind in the industry, specifically on the nutrition side, that do a really great job of taking, the actual latest, scientific research and kind of breaking it down and summarizing the conclusions. I cannot say that I'm out there reading all of the research papers, but I'm certainly, working with, whether it's in, I have direct mentors that work in the nutritional biochemistry space, or following those people in the industry whom I trust that can, relay the information to me, so that way I can relay it to clients, to, the masses, to the people who are just looking to live healthier lives. But
yeah, earlier in the podcast, and I think you said you kind of geared everything towards women, right? And helping women out with their goals and nutrition and whatever it is. Is there a reason why you you solely focus on women, or is it just?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I do primarily work with women. I've worked with men in the past, and I'm certainly open to it. No, I think it's because as a woman, I have that shared experience with women. I know for a lot of the women I work with, we go really deep, not only in, the fitness, nutrition space, but I encourage clients to share whatever is going on in their life, whether that's, in their career, in their relationship, because for me, it all impacts, the stress levels that they're dealing with, their lifestyle, what they're choosing to do, what's feasible for them, what's capable for them, and all of that. And so for me, I have just found that women tend to gravitate to me more so than men for things like that. And it probably has something to do with, my marketing and my branding and all of those things. But yeah, no, with my women, I like to make it a safe space, as cheesy as that sounds. But I'm like, I am not a therapist, but if you have some shit that's been going on, I hope I'm allowed to say that on here. Okay. Yeah. If you have things that are going on that aren't even related to health and fitness, like, I hold space for that too. And so I think for a lot of women, and I speak to this because I am a woman, so I can't speak from a man's point of view necessarily. But, just a lot of women kind of, whether it's placed upon them or they place it upon themselves, carry a lot of burden and weight, for taking care of their families, also having careers, wanting to show up as a boss and, achieve all these goals. And I mean, that's a lot. It's a lot for a woman or a man. And so, I try to encourage my clients to look at our relationship in a holistic fashion where we can have those conversations, we can work through those things together, even if it doesn't seem like it's directly related to their nutrition or fitness. In my opinion, it all is.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I can relate to that a lot just because in my experiences when looking at people for advice or whatever, based on whatever it be, new training program, nutrition, X, Y, and Z, like you just don't want to, okay, maybe this is personally speaking, I just don't want to go to a person and just say, hey, give me the training program, or hey, give me what diet to do. Keto. Okay, I'll go do that. No big deal. Right.
Yeah.
But, but just actually, and maybe this is just because of me started this podcast or, learning more about people and human psychology or whatever, but just kind of having these long form talks with people like yourself and actually just, figuring out, the who, what, when, where, how, and why, or whatever it's called, that rather than just you just saying, hey, do this because it works, it's just like, well, why does she think this? She's got to have reasoning behind this rather than just, hey, this is just what science says. You'll be healthy and you'll live till 150, whatever. Right. And it's just that, oh, she's doing her homework. Okay. She's actually learning like how my daily life is, what my stress intake is. And, do I have a family, and like, what do I do when I'm not working out and stuff like that. And like a lot of that means a lot to me, I guess, in this modern world, because, I'm one of those people who feel like I don't have a lot of people I can have those conversations with. And maybe and this is another thing we don't have to go down, but just maybe that's just like trust issues or just, the way I've been wired or what. But I always feel better though when I can say like, hey, this is everything that I'm doing and now that it, and now I don't know how to get from point A to point B. So you can help me to get to that point. Right?
Yeah, no, I think that all makes perfect sense. I think that's super valid. I think that's actually a very like shared experience or feeling by a lot of people. Like, we want to be heard. We want to be seen by others. And so, and I don't think we get a lot of that. Everybody's so busy, we're constantly like moving from one thing to the next thing. And so I think to like, whether it's, as a client or as a coach or a practitioner, to be able to provide that and hold space for someone to basically feel like they're being seen and feel like they're being heard, even if you're not like providing an answer necessarily, just allowing them to like let go of that, because we really do carry so much from our daily lives. I think is super powerful, and I think it's important. And I think that's what makes like nutrition's important 100%. Training's important 100%. Lifestyle is important, but I think that kind of deep connection and giving someone that ability and that outlet to let go of the things that they're carrying around with them is what makes a coaching client relationship just that much more, I don't know, deep and meaningful, really.
Yeah. Do you think that coaching relationship that you just said that it works better, woman to woman or man to man, just
not
based on anything or reason?
I don't think so. I think it depends maybe on a couple things. So potentially, I mean, I think regardless of whether it's woman to woman, man to man, woman to man, I think that it has to be someone energetically that you vibe with, that you feel safe with, that you feel comfortable with. And that doesn't always happen right away. But so for instance, like people are always like, so what's your process when you start working with people? And I'm like, well, first and foremost, we have a phone call because I want to make sure I'm a good fit for them and they're a good fit for me, not just skill set wise with what I can help them with, but like, if they just don't vibe with me or vice versa, then I don't think we're going to get the most out of the relationship. So I think that like sitting down and having a conversation like you and I are having, and getting to know the person is super important. And so, I mean, I honestly, like, I love masculine energy as well. I'm also, I tend to like stay in that space a lot of times. And so like my mentor right now is a man. He's not my health coach per se. But I think it really depends on the person and what kind of energy you gravitate toward. And just connecting with that individual and feeling, safe and such, like you can, open up to that person, I think is the most important thing. And I think some people, some women would just prefer working with a woman that just makes them feel more comfortable. Like I'm someone I could work with a man or a woman, just, as long as it's the right person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the reason I asked that was because in our gym, it's predominantly male coaches with one female coach. And sometimes we do these, well, not sometimes we do these on ramp things before we actually, it's like a test or kind of just like what's the word am I looking for? Introduction, like CrossFit 101 before we actually just say, hey, here's the class. Good luck, sink or swim, bro. But there's some people who either get paired with the female coach and they're a male and they probably have a strong ego about themselves. And, her and I've had these conversations where it's just that she felt like she didn't really vibe with them, that it was one of these that she wondered if, I wondered if you would have had him as in your own ramp class or whatever, if he would have listened to you more or took you more serious and things like that. So, and I guess why I asked that was just because I see it, and I've seen it a couple of times where, I guess they have this huge machismo ego and they won't leave it at the door and they think they know more just because they're a male and they probably have that alpha mentality. But whereas with me, it's just that, so, like you said about having this long form conversation, it's like, I don't care if you're he, she, or they, or whatever the pronouns are right now. But usually it's just for me, it's just like, hey, what do you know? What is your background? I mean, did you just, pick up something off the street and just start saying like, oh, this is how you should be eating or whatever? Or do you actually really, really know what you're talking about? And I think that's me actually probably had my ego checked a lot, especially in competing and with almost in just daily life, competing in CrossFit and, taking a few L's in your life when you know that, oh shit, okay, cool. Maybe I need to work a little bit harder. I need to, come back down to earth a little bit, being served that piece of humble pie. And so, and I guess that's why I asked that because, and then also sometimes I do know that it is kind of easier maybe for some males to open up to other males rather than just going up to a female and just saying, hey, this is why I'm so bad, or this is why I'm in this way. And I don't know, this is how I got sick and I don't know how to get better from here.
Mm-hmm.
And which I wondered that too, if it's kind of the same thing where, I guess women can do that same thing too. It's like woman to woman,
Yeah, no, I think 100%. I could see it like both ways. Yeah. Like, I feel like with a man too, like they might feel more comfortable going to a man, but then like also on the flip side, like there might be men who feel more comfortable like sharing that with a woman because they don't want to feel like they're like masculinized, whatever. That's not a word. Don't look it up. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, yeah. I think it really also, boils down to that person and their personality and, maybe what challenges they're dealing with at the time. But I do think everybody could stand an ego check. I have a friend who his saying is always be humble or be humbled. And I love it.
Yeah, that's a good saying. Yeah. I mean, I never wish anybody to go through, taking an L or being humbled or anything just because it sucks. It's a terrible feeling. It's just shit, I mean, but and I feel like, you being an athlete too, that you have to learn to, take these L's or losses or whatever you want to say. And you can either do whatever from there with them. You can either run with it and just say, hey, this will make me better. I'll learn from this and, it won't happen next time, or just let it beat you down and just become sick, I guess, which is probably not the great way of putting it. But I've just seen where people just, and in my experience, I've seen people like, I was doing a strength conditioning internship in Florida, and just where people would get, basically butthurt over, I don't know, whatever it was, taking that L or just knowing that they did something completely wrong and they just let it eat at them and eat at them and eat at them. And just, it was like a negative loop and they just kept going down and down. And I was like, bro, what are you doing? What are you doing? And it's one of those things that when I see stuff like that, it's like, I just don't get it in people. Like, hey, I mean, okay, it sucked. I know, but turn things around. I mean, life's not over. Let's do this. And some people just can't get out of it. And they can't get it out of their own way, I guess. And I've just never understood that. And I guess that's because I've beat it and I've kind of changed my mentality and just know that how to tackle it now when I see things like this, or when I do go through it. I'm not putting myself on a high horse or anything or pedestal, but I guess I sometimes just don't understand that mentality. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm totally in the same boat as you. I think it kind of goes down to having a fixed versus a growth mindset. But I think that, and one of the things that I love about fitness or sports is it's such a great parallel to life. Like, I also don't wish, any of that on anyone, but the truth is that whether it's in a sport, in fitness, or elsewhere, everybody is going to take an L at some point. Like, life is going to throw you one if it hasn't already, and you're listening to this podcast, good for you.
Yeah.
But it's going to throw it one way or the other, whether that's, a loss or going through something super challenging in life, or whether that is in some kind of competition. And so I think that, learning how to navigate that and learning how to use that. I always tell my clients, your pain is your power. So learning how to take that pain and turn it into something that fuels you.
Yeah.
It's something that, I think self-reflection is a beautiful thing that can come from those situations, but that is also a learned skill. And I think that as athletes, people who grew up playing sports, that is one of the biggest benefits, in my opinion. It's not just, being physically fit. It's learning how to have mental discipline. It's learning how to take the wins, take the losses, and realize that everything is finite. Nothing lasts forever. So your wins don't last forever. Your losses don't last forever. And, whatever you choose to do with them literally all comes down to like what's going on in between here. And I think that's super powerful. And I think that people can take those lessons that they, have in the CrossFit gym or in the weight room or playing a sport and translate that into whatever else life throws at them that, might be more challenging in the future, but it's all a parallel. That's just such the cool thing about sports. Like, yeah.
And going back and just so the audience knows and who's viewing or listening or watching to this. So, and I didn't want to skip over it, just that when you first have setting up a client, I guess, and you said you do initially a phone call, right? And so once you figure out like, hey, I probably can help this person, that what's the next step? I mean, do you start to learn, hey, what do you like to eat? Do you have any food allergies? What's your training like? I mean, just so people kind of get a sense of, and I know I think you said you've talked about that plenty of times before, but
it's okay.
Yeah, so the audience kind of knows like, hey, who's never heard of you or whatever before. Right. So, hey, what am I getting into here? If I want to go.
We do the phone call, some kind of conversation. If we both determine it's a good fit and we want to move forward, I have a pretty lengthy intake process. So, I have my intake form like most coaches do. It's very much like going to your doctor and filling, for the first time, they give you like a stack of new patient paperwork. Mine's not as scary, but it is. It's all, health history based, nutrition, wellness, lifestyle, all of those things. I ask a lot of questions. So we'll do like a dietary assessment. We'll keep a food journal for 4 to 5 days, just so I can get a sense of where someone's at. And I always encourage clients to, like, I actually had a new client today who was like, I might change what I eat a little bit. And I'm like, no. Like, I want you to just do what you normally do. Like, there's no judgment here. Then the more accurate of a baseline I can get, the better I can create a plan that's going to help you. So I have, a lengthy intake form. I have a couple of additional assessments that I like to give people just to gauge things like gut health, hormone health, things like that. Obviously, if they have other health challenges present, we talk about those. Yes. If they have lab work from, other doctors, I do have a third-party lab company that I can get labs done for clients. It's not typically the first thing I go to because I like to be mindful of, financial commitments and all of that with people. But if they have lab work that they've gotten done from another doctor or practitioner, we can certainly look at that as well. And basically we take all of this information, we'll do things too, like their check-in photos. We'll look at actually like what's going on with their biometrics and all of that. But we take all of that info and, depending on what that kind of looks like versus what their goal is and where they want to go to, what the time frame is that we're looking at. That's how we kind of start figuring out, okay, what, how can we get this person momentum, out of the gates? How can we start getting them some quick wins? What are going to be the biggest things to, help move them along? And also, what are those really foundational things? Like, it would make no sense to go into a super like nuanced nutritional strategy if someone can't just like consistently eat high quality food 80 to 90% of the time. Or, if somebody's like overtraining, or maybe on the flip side, not moving at all, like, we don't need to get super complex with our training strategy if they're just sitting on their butt watching Netflix all day, or, if they're not sleeping well or consistently. And so obviously we take all of that into consideration because those really are the foundations of optimal health, regardless of what the specific goal is. I find too, when it comes to things like mindset, I ask questions in my intake process, like about how clients view themselves, what is their self-talk like? And I ask them specific questions and give them an opportunity to start opening up. But I find a lot of those things unfold as the coaching relationship progresses, and that trust is start to, be built, and we become comfortable with each other. And then, other things come up, and it gives you the opportunity to tweak and work as you go.
I like that. That's a good philosophy, I think. And that, did you just kind of develop that through trial and error? Or was this something that, through you, I think you said you had a couple of mentors, and that, you found out what worked for you and that what doesn't work for you. And it's, hey, I'm going to take everything that I do like and what I do know and just, hey, let's start spreading it to these people, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's typically my style with things, whether it's my intake process or like my program in general, is like learning as much as I can and then pulling what I feel is the most relevant to what I'm doing. But yeah, obviously my former coaches, my mentors, of course, that has been, such a guiding factor in how I do things. But also, I've worked with coaches in the past where they were a great example of what I wanted to do, but also what I didn't want to do. And so I think learning, what's not in alignment for you is also just as important when you're learning from other people. And then, to be honest, with the intake process, I just got really tired of backtracking, like, being 4 weeks in with a client and being like, did I ask this question? Did I get this information from them? And so I'm like, no, we have to do it all up for, as much as we can up front. Obviously things come up and we're constantly in a discovery phase when we're tweaking and working with someone, but yeah.
And kind of touching on philosophy, do you have certain exercise protocols you push? Your certain nutrition you push towards those, or do you just kind of just say, hey, I'm very aware of intermittent fasting, keto, carnivore. Well, I don't know what people are doing now, Whole30. Like, I don't even know if there's, but do you kind of lean towards one of those? Like I said, like, hey, or you just start to like experience and find out what's working for that person, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, I don't push any one particular diet or style of eating. It really depends on the person. Like, for instance, I have a client right now who has had some very challenging gut health challenges, and she's on what's called autoimmune paleo. So it's a slightly stricter version of paleo. And I would not normally want to put someone on that. Like, I literally, like, that's not something that's really enjoyable, but she has so many food triggers. So that was what kind of prompted going into that and working for a month or two in that phase. And she's rocked it. She's been so great. But that's not something I would generally want to do with someone if I didn't have to. I think one of the most important things for people to understand too, when it comes to nutrition, the foundations are the foundations for a reason. So, quality foods, making sure that we're having, even if you're in a calorie deficit, like let's say you're going into a fat loss phase. You can be in a calorie deficit and still be getting sufficient micronutrients. So just because, we are not, our energy expenditure is more than our energy intake, we can still prioritize micronutrient rich foods. We can supplement properly. So obviously we want to make sure that regardless of what kind of phase we're in, what kind of diet strategy we're doing, that we have sufficient micronutrients. We have, sufficient water intake, all of the other things are in place. But I could literally make a use case against, every single diet and for every single diet. So I think it's so individual based on, the health challenges someone's experiencing. Also adherence too. That's a big thing that I think a lot of people don't think of. And I tell clients all the time when they ask me like, well, what's the best diet or what's the best, exercise plan? And I'm like, well, it's twofold, right? So like, A, it has to be congruent with what your goal is, because I've seen people eat or exercise in such a manner that is not congruent with their goal, right? Like CrossFit's awesome. If you want to be a bodybuilder though, like just doing CrossFit's not going to be the modality for you.
Exactly.
Right. And so like, also if you're training for performance, but you're like, cutting carbs out completely, unless you truly are a fat adapted athlete, like that's going to be really difficult, right? Especially if you're, using the energy systems that are required for like shorter, more powerful bursts of activity. And so I think that for people to understand that whatever strategy you take needs to be congruent with your goal, but on the like flip side, it also has to be adherable. So I could give you literally the best plan in the world, and if it's just if you're not going to follow it, then it does not matter how great it is. So that's like my two-pronged foundational approach, and then the nuances from there. It's based on basically how well someone can adhere to something, and if I truly feel like it's a fit. So I think you talked earlier on education sort of, and like people understanding, why behind things. And I'm a big proponent of that. Like for clients to ask me why I try to explain it to them, but I'm like, if you ever feel confused about why we're doing it, ask me, because if I can't give you a true answer of why we're taking a certain approach, then I'm not a very good coach. But also I think that people are more empowered to do what they need to do when they understand why they're doing it.
Yeah. And talking on education, and it was 2016 or 2017. And when I started to that's when I guess I started getting more serious about my nutrition, because I was about 5 or 4 years in CrossFit. And also I just wanted to lean out for whatever reason. I was kind of going through to be honest with you, I was going through a breakup, and she broke my heart. So I was like, I want to lean out.
It happens to the best of us. Don't worry.
Okay. So anyway, and so I worked with, and I don't know if you've heard of them, but Renaissance periodization.
I think so.
Diet. Yeah, they're big in like the CrossFit, and I think they have done like some swimsuit competition people. Anyway, they were just a whole nother nutrition kind of people. And so when I started working with them, that I did the whole cut lean diet thing template or whatever, and they gave me this thing like, hey, you're supposed to only eat like 4 ounces of protein for breakfast and whatever it is for lunch. And that was like my first mind-blowing experience when I saw like weighed by chicken breast. I was like, all right, this is probably about 4 ounces. And it was like, 8 or 9. I forgot what it was. And I was like, oh, I was like, oh, that's not even close to what I thought it was. And then, like I had to eat some spinach and stuff. And I was like, damn, well, no wonder. And I mean, I'm not overweight by any means. I've never have been. I've just been lucky in that sense where I've always just, just had a good body type and just always worked out. But, like I said, when I wanted to get down, I forgot what I got down to, like 4 or 5, 6% body fat. And that it was like, oh, wow, that I'm not eating like I thought I was eating. You think you're eating clean and you're healthy and whatever. And just like, oh, and I'm not saying chicken's not and spinach is not clean or healthy, but it's not going to give you the goals just because of what you think you might have saw on. Do you remember bodybuilding.com?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Okay. So
they're still around too.
Oh, are they? Okay. Well, I don't want to put them down because I used them a lot in college, and I don't know where they got their information from, or if it was just random people who would post up, but it was like, oh, this is the Bible right here. Whatever they're doing, whatever they're saying, I'll eat. If I eat cans of tuna, I'm going to be, look like, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I guess. So, and that was when it started to become to me is like, okay, let's start, going down these rabbit holes and learning and stuff. And with those finds with those, I guess, finds for me do you know who Dr. Lane Norton is?
Yeah, actually. So he is in Tampa. Yeah. Not too far. So he's someone who, like, from a nutrition perspective, when it comes to like actually breaking down research,
exactly.
He's in the research. So he's good to follow.
That was exactly my point right there, is that, I've learned that, and I listened to him on podcasts, and just that, oh, he's actually reading this shit and he's actually studying it, and just, where people, do you ever hear that stupid social, I don't know if it's a social narrative, but social rumor where Diet Coke will give you cancer or something? And
yes.
And I think I heard him talking about how that he's like, well, maybe if you're probably drinking 2 liters of it every day, but I mean, I'm pretty sure one's not going to hurt you anytime. And I probably butchered that whole statement that he made, but he's like, I have a Diet Coke, why not? Or whatever. But, and one thing I wanted to ask you, since we brought him up though, and just to get your thoughts on this, like, the power of suggestion and like the placebo effect.
Oh, I love this topic. Please.
Oh, let's go. Okay, good. I've been that's he talked about it on a podcast maybe a week or 2 ago. And like ever since then I was like, ooh, I need to learn more about this. So go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what you want me to say about it, but
everything. I mean, I know we're getting a little short on time here, but just your thoughts and just like, like, I think there's something to it. And he actually said there was actually some studies that are actually, what's the word am I looking for? Approving, saying that there is, it works.
Oh, 100%.
I don't
Yeah.
think he was saying that go out there and just tell yourself you're going to go run a marathon when you never have ran one. And just because you're telling yourself you can, you'll do it. But there is some science behind it that works. So I guess that's the only thing I've found out so far. So yeah, I would love to.
Hey, that's all you need to know. No, that's great. I will, full transparency, I can't speak probably to the level of the actual research being done as someone like Layne Norton could.
That's okay.
We have a pharmaceutical company that is introducing a new drug, and they obviously going through a controlled trial have to offer a placebo to a control group. And so there's been I don't even know because I can't cite it, but like countless recordings essentially of showing that the placebo drug for certain drugs can be just as effective, sometimes more effective, or almost as effective as, the actual drug itself. And so I think, that at a very baseline level shows what the power of suggestion does. Right. And I think, one of the keys to, like you said, yeah, it's not about just like going out there and like being like, I'm going to run a marathon. Like, I think that when it comes to something like belief, and that's so ambiguous, right? Like we can't really measure belief. We can't really measure emotions very much. And I think that's why like those things have not been part of the scientific community for so long. And now they are like becoming more researched. But like there has to be some, true level of belief, like at a very deep subconscious level, right? So like if you think about it from a perspective of medicine, in my opinion, why a placebo drug can work so well for people is because people trust doctors, right? Like we look up to the medical establishment. So if a doctor or someone who's administering this drug whom we trust, we think they're an expert, they know all these things, we just kind of release that control almost to them. And they tell us that this is the drug that's going to heal us, even if it's a sugar pill. Like we already like that suggestibility where we are primed, our brains are primed to receive that suggestion. So I think when you look at anything in life and you're looking at like the power of belief, I think there's actually, I think it's a term that's called like the ladder of believability. So it's like, if I were to go out and say like, I'm going to be a mega billionaire, like there's part of my brain that like doesn't believe that because I haven't taken like the 5 steps before that. You know what I mean? So like when you're like working to change your beliefs, whether it's, with your health, your fitness, or just anywhere in life, I think that like with anything, taking incremental steps to train your brain to be open to the suggestions that don't seem quite as far-fetched is what kind of helps you to move along that scale. There was a researcher, he's still alive actually, Bruce Lipton. He has a book called The Biology of Belief. It is amazing. Please write it down, read it.
Right now.
And he was a professor, PhD researcher, and he was like one of the first people to kind of be on the forefront of, I think, the placebo effect, the nocebo effect. So that's kind of the opposite side of the coin. Yeah. And his book is great. And then there's also, she has passed, but a researcher from the 70s, her name is Candace Pert. And I believe she was responsible for finding the dopamine receptor, I believe. And she has a great book. It's very like science heavy. So like I'll read it and I kind of have to like pause and put it down for a few minutes and kind of read it in sections, but it's called The Molecules of Emotion. And that kind of ties into the placebo effect, but she actually talks more specifically about how when we have, thoughts or beliefs, if we believe that we suck, like we create this feeling of like, I suck, right? Like that is actually, a thought and a belief that creates a feeling actually produces a tangible result in the body through neuropeptides and other chemical messengers. And so her research was very much on how something like a belief or a thought, how it actually plays out and affects you from a physiological perspective, which I think is awesome. And I think that also kind of ties into why something like the placebo effect works or, maybe doesn't work subsequently for certain people, because that level of believability has the ability to produce a physiological effect. So yeah, those are some they're like OG researchers in this space. And I just get super hyped on this topic because I feel like it's something that like science has kind of strayed away from for so many years, and now they're not. And it's so cool to like see, so much more of this coming out, and people, like Layne Norton and other folks who have big presence on social media and other platforms to be talking about it.
Well, I mean, and real quick though, just with that thought that I think, and this is maybe my opinion, well, this is my opinion, that that in those days, like 60s, 70s, 80s, like if you were to maybe talk like that about saying the power of suggestion and that there's something to it, that you're almost labeled as a person who was kind of, what's the word, like hippie-ish, I guess.
Yeah.
That it was just kind of thrown aside, where it was just, you're kind of dumb for thinking that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But now, and I don't know if it's because of information and podcasting and this, all the research that's coming out, people like Dr. Layne Norton, where like topics like that are like kind of sexy, like for a better word, like hey, yeah, let's talk about it. That's cool. Like, hey, what's on that? What do you know? What do you know? Hey, yeah, let's explore these ideas. So
yeah, I'm biased. I think it's sexy, but yeah, it's exciting and it's fun to talk about.
But anyway, all right. But yeah, again, I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate you being here. If people want to find you or anything you want to plug and promote and all that good stuff, Allie, do that.
Awesome. Yeah. You can find me. I'm primarily active on Instagram. My handle is at AllieCassHealth. And then my website is www.alliecasthealth. If you enjoyed this or resonated with anything that we talked about, I'd love to just, connect with you, hear what you need help with, whatever it is. I love this conversation. I'm all about the human connection, especially after the last few years. So if this is something that sounded fun for you, then let's connect.
Well, you're a badass person. Thank you for being here again. I really enjoyed talking with you. So
thank you so much, Chris. It was great to be here.
See you folks. We're out of here.